The gray morning sky loomed over Ironvale Engineering as thunder rumbled distantly, an ominous soundtrack to what should have been an ordinary Wednesday. Inside the company's sleek new headquarters, decorated with sterile glass and cold chrome accents, Leonard Mercer sat across from a pair of polished faces who didn't quite meet his eyes. The air in the room was dry, lifeless, and reeked of rehearsed platitudes. "Leonard, as part of the structural realignment process, your role is being phased out effective immediately," said Clara Fields, the company's chief strategy officer, not once looking up from her tablet. Her voice was practiced, flat, void of empathy. Leonard, age 62, blinked once. After 19 years as head of financial operations at Ironvale, a legacy manufacturer of agricultural equipment, this was how it ended. A conference room at 8 a.m. No handshake. No gratitude. Just two executives who probably couldn't explain what a profit-loss statement looked like. "You'll need to hand over your security badge and parking credentials," added Ron Travers, the HR director, sliding a bland cardboard box across the table like it contained a prize. "Someone from building security will accompany you to collect your belongings." Leonard didn't protest. He didn't ask for clarification or plead for reconsideration. He merely reached into his coat pocket, retrieved his ID badge, and placed it on the table with precision. His other hand clutched a worn leather briefcase, his late wife's parting gift from a simpler time. "Is there anything you'd like to say?" Clara asked, voice thick with anticipated conflict. Leonard looked at her for the first time, but his eyes didn't show fury. They held history, numbers, names, years, memories of colleagues long gone. "No. I'm good." He stood, adjusted his collar, and nodded toward the glass wall. Outside, he saw employees passing by, some pausing at the sight of the boxed-up man who once had an office on the top floor. They averted their gazes, suddenly fascinated by the floor tiles. As Leonard followed security to his office, he gently wrapped up the framed photo of his wife, who had passed from pancreatic cancer 8 years ago. Her picture always sat by his monitor, a silent witness to every budget draft and late-night audit. The young security officer, Mark, looked visibly uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, Mr. Mercer," he whispered. "This wasn't right." Leonard smiled faintly. "You're not the one who should apologize." Inside his briefcase was more than just years of notes and ledgers. It held a compact flash drive, encrypted and backed up, containing meticulous records, shell company payouts, falsified vendor invoices, unauthorized wire transfers, and emails that mysteriously went missing from internal servers. 3 years of careful documentation. He had started noticing discrepancies the day Clara had accidentally misplaced contract verification forms, and when Ron began advocating for policy changes that would sidestep financial oversight. But they hadn't expected Leonard to document every deviation. As he exited the lobby for the last time, the front desk receptionist didn't make eye contact. Even she seemed embarrassed. Leonard stepped into the drizzle, cardboard box in one hand, leather case in the other. He reached his car, placed the box in the back seat, and allowed himself one grim smile. They thought they were removing a relic of the past. In truth, they had just awakened a storm. It hadn't always been this way. Leonard had joined Ironvale back when it was a modest but proud manufacturer. Run by its founder, Benjamin Ironwood, the company had once believed in values, reliability, responsibility, precision. Benjamin had walked the factory floor every morning before reviewing any financials. "Numbers never lie, Lenny," he used to say, hand on Leonard's shoulder. "But men do. Your job is to make sure the books don't become fiction." Under Benjamin's guidance, Leonard had found purpose. The team operated like a family. Engineers, welders, accountants, and custodians all shared one break room, one culture. It had been a rare place, transparent and ethical. But after Benjamin retired, his daughter sold Ironvale to a consortium of global investors who promised modernization and market expansion. That was when the erosion began. At first, the changes were minor. Longer procurement cycles. Bulk orders from questionable suppliers. The rebranding campaign that focused more on glossy ads than product quality. Then came the executive shuffle. Clara Fields, with her MBA from a top-tier school and zero manufacturing experience, arrived touting optimization initiatives. Ron Travers followed, bringing along a raft of policy updates that created more blind spots than structure. Leonard, by nature, wasn't paranoid. But when payments began appearing to vendors that didn't align with incoming shipments, he raised questions. Clara smiled and dismissed it as part of a supplier transition. When his follow-up inquiries went unanswered, and audits were cancelled at the last minute, he stopped talking, and started recording. Every dubious approval, Every mismatched figure, every phantom charge labeled as consulting, he logged them all. When a junior employee was fired for flagging safety issues with imported parts, Leonard knew it wasn't carelessness. It was design. His daughter, Olivia, a rising star at a regional law firm, noticed the change in him. "You're always at the office, Dad. You look drained." "It's just end of quarter reporting," he had lied. Nothing to worry about. But he was worried. Deeply. Especially after Ron placed his unqualified nephew in a position that gave him full access to company-wide financial controls. It was only a matter of time. And now, that time had arrived. Back home, Leonard placed the box on his kitchen island and poured himself a measure of scotch from the bottle he only opened for life-altering moments. This counted. The house was eerily quiet, filled with ghosts and silence. He wandered into his study and powered up the desktop. The screen blinked to life, revealing rows of folders, chronologically organized, color-coded, labeled with clinical precision. He opened a blank document and began typing. Not an accusation. Not a threat. Just the truth. As Benjamin had taught him. He hovered over the send button, the recipient fields already populated with addresses from the Securities and Exchange Bureau, the state financial regulator, and a watchdog media outlet. But he didn't click it. Instead, he opened a drawer and pulled out a worn photo album. There, tucked between pages of company barbecues and strategy retreats, was a picture of him and his wife, Miriam, laughing under string lights at an Ironvale anniversary event. "What would you do, Mimi?" he whispered. The answer came as clear as if she were beside him. "Do the right thing. Let the truth speak." That night, sleep evaded him. But by morning, something had shifted. He had nothing left to lose, and everything still worth protecting. The next morning, Leonard Mercer was up before dawn, sitting at his dining table with a notebook in front of him and a cup of black coffee going cold. Sunlight barely filtered through the curtains, but it illuminated the lists and scribbled arrows he had drawn overnight, connections between shell companies, dates of contract approvals, vendor changes, and sudden leadership shifts. It resembled the kind of messy evidence board you'd expect in a detective show. Only this wasn't fiction. He picked up the phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in over a decade. "James? It's Leonard Mercer. I need your help. And I need you to listen very carefully." James Prentice, a federal prosecutor specializing in corporate fraud, had once been Leonard's roommate in college. They had drifted over the years, life had pulled them in different directions, but the bond of trust had never truly eroded. When Leonard laid out a brief summary of what he had discovered, James didn't hesitate. "Come to my office today. Bring what you have. Don't email anything. Just bring it in person." Leonard didn't waste time. He printed summaries, encrypted the digital files, and burned 2 additional copies to USB drives, one to go with him, and one to stay with his daughter, Olivia, under lock and key. He knew better than to underestimate the reach of the people now running Ironvale. They had surveillance. They had lawyers. They had influence. He arrived at James's office by 10 a.m., ushered quickly into a conference room with no windows and a heavy door. For hours, they went over files, transactions with no corresponding receipts, payments to consulting firms that didn't exist on any registry, invoices for equipment that never arrived, and most damningly, changes to the pension fund accounting structures. "Leonard, this is significant," James said, leaning back, brow furrowed. "But they'll argue it's all circumstantial. Accounting errors. Poor oversight. If we're going to build a case, we'll need insider testimony. Someone current. Someone with system access." Leonard sighed. "I might know someone." That evening, as Leonard reviewed more files at his home office, a certified envelope arrived at his door. Inside was the official severance agreement from Ironvale, a pittance for 19 years of service and a clause demanding total silence about anything he'd seen, done, or even suspected during his tenure. Leonard called Olivia to review it. Her tone turned cold halfway through. "This NDA isn't normal," she said. "It's almost aggressive. They're trying to block you from cooperating with regulators, even if what you witnessed was criminal. That's not legal, it's coercive. They're betting I won't have the resources to fight them," Leonard replied. "But I'm not planning on fighting them alone." What he didn't tell Olivia was that earlier that day, a black sedan had been parked down the street for hours. He didn't recognize the driver. By evening, dozens of email subscriptions to services he never signed up for flooded his inbox. His bank called about an attempted password reset. The message was clear, they were watching. The next morning, the phone rang. An unknown number. "Leonard, it's me. Cheryl." It was Cheryl Alston, his former assistant. "Quiet. diligent, thoughtful. She'd stayed on after Leonard's departure. "They're doing something, Leonard. It's not right," she whispered. "I've been pulled into meetings where they're changing audit logs, fabricating vendor receipts. I think they're cleaning house digitally." Leonard's breath caught. "Do you still have access?" "I do. But not for long. They're restructuring again. I overheard Ron say my position is being outsourced next month. They don't know I can still access old log files through your credentials. I've started saving what I can." "Cheryl, that's dangerous." "I know. But it's not just creative accounting. They're pulling money from the pension reserves. And they're planning to sell the manufacturing division without notifying employees." Leonard stood motionless. Selling the division without informing staff was underhanded, but draining the pension fund was criminal. "Where can we meet?" he asked. "Somewhere far from the city." "Do you still have access to your uncle's cabin in Windridge?" He did. It was an hour out in the hills, private, isolated, and empty this time of year. They met that weekend. Cheryl looked tired, worn thin by stress. Her hands trembled as she handed over a flash drive. "This includes before and after versions of ledgers, meeting transcripts, even flagged email threads, anything I could get without triggering alerts." She sat heavily in the chair by the fire. "Leonard, this goes beyond anything we suspected. They're misreporting product safety inspections to boost valuation. I found an internal memo suggesting they skipped materials testing on a shipment bound for military vehicles. Real lives could be at stake." Leonard froze. "Who else knows?" "Darren from Quality Control. He flagged the skipped inspection. But then he disappeared. HR says he resigned, but his badge was never turned in. His desk was cleaned out overnight." A cold weight settled in Leonard's gut. This wasn't just corporate misbehavior. This was corruption with consequences beyond money. On the drive back, Leonard couldn't shake the thought of Darren. Had he been silenced? Was Cheryl next? Was he? He called James. "This is bigger than we thought," he said. "Government contracts. Falsified safety tests. We need to move fast." James's voice was calm but urgent. "Leonard, you need to be careful. They're trying to erase the paper trail. Desperate people do dangerous things." That night, Leonard couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house made his heart skip. At 2:43 a.m., his security system pinged. Someone had approached his back window, just long enough to trigger the sensor, not long enough to be caught. He didn't wait. By morning, he had moved the evidence into 3 separate secure locations. One went to Olivia with clear instructions. One into a vault in a private bank, far from Iron Vale's reach. The third went to James, along with a printed key, delivered by courier. Then, he began reaching out to others, former employees like Owen from procurement, who had been forced out after raising red flags. "I've been waiting for this," Owen said over coffee at a diner miles away. "They kicked me out fast. Then someone broke into my house. Didn't take anything, just my laptop. I filed a police report. Thought no one would believe me." "You're not alone anymore," Leonard said. Together, they began to connect the dots. Piece by piece, testimony by testimony, the truth was forming into something undeniable. And Leonard knew, Iron Vale's reckoning was no longer a matter of if, but when. Leonard had always known Iron Vale Engineering would push back once they sensed a threat. But he hadn't anticipated the intensity of their retaliation. The morning after his meeting with Cheryl, a new email appeared in his inbox, from a block center. 4 words. "Back off. Last warning." Later that afternoon, while checking his mail, he noticed a white SUV parked across from his house. Same car as 2 nights before. Different license plate. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was surveillance. Leonard forwarded everything, emails, images of the SUV, screenshots of bank alerts, to James Prentice. James called within the hour. "They're trying to rattle you," he said. "But this confirms they know you've got something they don't want out. It also means they're worried." "Worried enough to break the law?" James paused. "Desperate enough, yes. Leonard, we need to escalate. What you've uncovered, this isn't just financial misconduct. With the pension manipulation and the defense contracts, we're bordering on national security violations." That got Leonard's attention. He wasn't dealing with fraud anymore. He was staring down the barrel of something much darker, corporate greed intersecting with public safety. That afternoon, Leonard received a call from another old contact, Grant Willis, a former operations manager forced into early retirement the previous year. "I heard you've been asking questions," Grant said. "You'll want to talk to someone. But we can't meet in town. They've got ears everywhere." They agreed to meet in an old train yard where Grant now volunteered part-time restoring vintage railcars. Out of the way. Off the grid. Grant brought a box. Inside, hard copies of old inspection logs, delivery manifests, and rejected safety reports, all of which had been digitally wiped or altered in the past year. "This," Grant said, tapping one report, "is what pushed me out. I flagged a shipment of industrial valves that failed pressure tolerance tests. Next thing I know, I'm on a performance review for inefficiency. I was out within a month." Leonard flipped through the documents. "You kept all this?" Grant smirked. "I was trained by the same people who trained you. You never throw away the truth." When Leonard returned home, he found his mailbox pried open. His personal mail scattered in the bushes. Nothing stolen. Nothing useful. Just a reminder that they were watching. That they could get close. Later that night, Olivia came by, concerned. "Dad, you're being targeted. We need to file a formal report, get protection." "I have," he said, voice tired but calm. "James is escalating it to the Department of Justice. And now with this latest evidence, we've got backup." She studied his face. "You're not scared." "I am," he admitted. "But that doesn't matter. Not anymore." Then came the unexpected breakthrough. A blocked number. Leonard answered with his heart in his throat. "Leonard. It's Darren. Darren Hayes. The missing quality control specialist." His voice was strained, hollow. "I don't have much time. They know I know. But they don't know I've got proof." "Where are you?" "I can't say. I'm out of state. I had to disappear. But listen, look into the Benton Tech contract. Check the actual test results against what Ironvale submitted to the Department of Defense. They're shipping faulty components in tactical systems. If they get deployed, people die." "Darren, wait." But the call dropped. Leonard stood still for a moment. Then called James. "I think we just crossed the line from corporate fraud to federal emergency." Within 48 hours, Leonard was sitting in a secure federal office with two stone-faced investigators from the Department of Defense. James stood nearby as Leonard laid out everything: the accounting manipulations, pension theft, doctor test results, and now, false certifications for military equipment. "We'll need full cooperation," one agent said. "This is no longer just a whistleblower case. This is national interest." "I understand," Leonard replied. "And I have a plan." The following morning, Leonard made a call. To Clara Fields. He spoke with a calm, almost defeated tone. "I've reconsidered the severance offer. I think I'd like to come in and sign the paperwork." There was a pause. "That's excellent news, Leonard," Clara replied, her tone light with false warmth. "Can you come in tomorrow morning?" "I'd prefer somewhere neutral," Leonard said. "There's too much history in that building. Let's meet at the Westbrook Lodge downtown. They've got a quiet business lounge." She hesitated. But agreed. What she didn't know, the entire lodge was now laced with surveillance tech. The FBI, DoD, and DOJ were embedded and ready. Rooms monitored. Exits watched. Every handshake, every signature, every threat, documented. Leonard arrived first, dressed simply but neatly. When Clara walked in, flanked by her legal advisor, she looked confident. Almost smug. She placed the paperwork on the table. Just some standard closing agreements. A little NDA language, a bump in severance. "I think we can put this whole misunderstanding behind us." Leonard smiled politely. "Before I sign, just a point of clarification." Clara arched an eyebrow. "This NDA, it covers all matters, correct? Including the irregularities in the pension fund? And the Benton Tech materials?" For the first time, her smile faltered. The attorney beside her stiffened. "I'm sorry," she said. "What did you just say?" Leonard sat back, his voice crisp. "I'm confirming that this agreement wouldn't legally prevent me from fulfilling any obligations to report federal crimes." That was when the doors opened. James entered first. Then the agents. Then more. "Clara Fields," one said, holding up a warrant. "You are under investigation for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and violations of national defense procurement statutes. Please stand up." Her face went pale. She reached for her phone, intercepted. "You'll also want to contact your CEO and Mr. Travers," another agent added. "They're currently in custody. You're next." Leonard watched silently as she was read her rights. In the weeks that followed, the story broke nationwide. Ironvale executives arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud and defense scandal. Pension theft, defective parts, and whistleblowers, the collapse of a manufacturing giant. Leonard gave no interviews. He let the documents speak. He returned to a quiet life, helping the interim board of Iron Vale restructure. With federal aid and a newly formed employee council, the core manufacturing division was saved. Rebranded. Reborn. He declined a permanent position. His role was done. One evening, Olivia asked, "Any regrets?" He thought for a moment. "No," Leonard replied. "Not for a second." They tried to bury the truth. But the numbers always speak. The Westbrook Lodge wasn't Leonard's first choice. He would have preferred somewhere even quieter, more anonymous, but its business suites and plush conference rooms made it a convenient trap. And more importantly, its location, tucked beside a forested lakeside outside the city, gave federal agents a controlled perimeter. By the time Leonard arrived, everything was in motion. Surveillance teams had wired the meeting room. Hidden microphones waited in faux potted plants in the elegant glass chandelier above the negotiation table. A nearby suite served as the command center, where James and a small team of Department of Defense and FBI investigators monitored the operation. At precisely 9:03 a.m., Clara Field stepped into the room. She was dressed impeccably in a cream-colored blazer and crisp slacks, accompanied by her legal counsel, a square-jawed man with a briefcase and a barely concealed smirk. Clara's expression was composed but tight. She had something to prove, and it wasn't just corporate damage control. It was dominance. "Leonard," she greeted, her tone laced with mock warmth. "I'm glad we could come to a reasonable conclusion." He offered a silent nod, playing his part, a weary former employee seeking closure. On the table before him sat the revised severance package, 5 months of salary and a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement that read more like a leash than a legal document. Her attorney slid the pages toward Leonard with a pen on top. "We added the 2 extra months, as promised," Clara said smoothly. "And the NDA is standard. Nothing to be concerned about." Leonard flipped through the pages with deliberate calm. He skimmed the jargon until he reached the final clause. Then, with precise timing, he paused and looked up. "This agreement," he began, "covers all company matters, past, present, and future, correct?" The attorney nodded. "It ensures confidentiality across all aspects of your prior employment." Leonard leaned forward. "Even the Benton Tech testing certifications? Or the pension fund withdrawals?" The air shifted. The subtle confidence in the room evaporated. Clara's expression froze. Her attorney tensed, sensing they'd walked into something. Clara tried to recover. "I'm sorry, what are you suggesting?" Leonard closed the folder gently and met her gaze with quiet resolve. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating that I've already shared documentation of Iron Vale's internal financial fraud, falsified safety compliance, and embezzlement with federal authorities. Including our conversation, right now." On cue, the conference room door swung open. James entered first, his presence commanding and unreadable. Behind him came 2 federal agents with visible badges. "Clara Fields," one said, "we have a warrant for your immediate detainment in connection with an ongoing investigation into government contract violations and corporate fraud." Her face went white. "Excuse me?" Her attorney blurted, rising from his seat. "This is a private business meeting." "You'll have your chance to review the charges," the agent said coolly. "Right now, we need to speak with your client. Please step aside." Clara instinctively reached for her handbag. One of the agents calmly intercepted it. "You won't be needing that." As they escorted her out of the room, Leonard remained seated, his hands folded over the unopened pen. He didn't gloat. He didn't even smile. The moment carried no satisfaction, only finality. James stepped to his side and placed a thick folder on the table. "We have enough now," he said quietly. "Between Darren's call, Cheryl's logs, and the testimony from former employees, it's enough for indictments." "What about the pension fund?" Leonard asked. James exhaled. "The DOJ and Treasury are stepping in. We won't be able to recover all of it. But we'll get enough to prevent collapse." Leonard nodded once, slowly. Then it was worth it. The fallout came fast and hard. Within 48 hours, national headlines screamed the scandal. Executive suite at Iron Vale indicted for massive fraud scheme. Pension funds raided, military contracts endangered, DOJ takes over. Whistleblower accountant triggers corporate shakeup. Clara, Travers, and Iron Vale's CEO were taken into federal custody. More board members followed. An emergency audit confirmed what Leonard and Cheryl had feared. Not only had Iron Vale falsified inspection data, but defective parts had already made it into limited production for military vehicles deployed overseas. The Department of Defense halted all shipments. Thousands of parts were recalled. Damaged units were pulled for inspection. The most horrifying revelation? The defective parts, precision pressure valves, were critical in armored troop transports. Had they failed in the field, it could have resulted in loss of life. Iron Veil Engineering's name became toxic overnight. Stock value plummeted. Investors scrambled. Vendors refused to fulfill orders. But amid the chaos, something extraordinary happened. A coalition of long-term employees, aided by a state-run economic development fund and a team of independent legal and financial advisors, proposed a bold solution: purchase Iron Veil's core manufacturing facilities and operate them as an employee-owned cooperative. The proposal was risky, ambitious, and unconventional. It was also the only way to save the jobs, and the pensions. Leonard was approached to serve on the interim oversight board. He politely declined a permanent position, but agreed to help rebuild the financial infrastructure. "I'll help clean it up," he told the committee. "But after that, it's your legacy to protect." 6 months later, Leonard stood inside the newly christened Iron Legacy Manufacturing, watching forklifts hum across the production floor. The company had been reborn, not as a hollowed-out corporate shell, but as a resilient, grounded operation with transparency written into its DNA. The logo had changed. So had the leadership. But the heart of the company, the people, remained. Even Mark, the young security guard who had once escorted Leonard out, now greeted him at the front desk with a respectful nod. "Mr. Mercer," he said, "good to see you again." "Just about done," Leonard replied, signing the visitor's log for what he knew would be the last time. Outside, Olivia waited for him in her car. She rolled down the window as he climbed into the passenger seat. "How does it look in there?" she asked. "Strong," Leonard said. "They've got the right systems now. The right people. They'll be okay." She smiled. "You did that?" He shook his head. "They did it. I just helped make the truth visible." As they pulled away, Leonard cast one last glance at the facility. The sun hit the roof just right, casting the logo's silhouette across the courtyard. Benjamin Ironwood's original mantra echoed in his mind: "Numbers don't lie. People do. Keep the books honest, and the company will follow." He had done just that. No revenge. No ego. Just justice. The news cycle, once aflame with scandal, had moved on. In a world that thrived on constant outrage, even the takedown of a corporate empire like Iron Veil Engineering eventually faded beneath newer, flashier headlines. But for Leonard Mercer, the final chapter hadn't been written in a courtroom or a press release, it was unfolding quietly, patiently, and with purpose. 6 months after the arrests, Iron Legacy Manufacturing, formerly Iron Veil, was standing on its own feet. Rebuilt not from investor capital or mergers, but from the collective strength of its workers. The employee co-op had weathered the storm better than anyone had expected. Thanks to the federal investigation, and the pressure that came with national attention, the Department of Justice had compelled Iron Veil's original stakeholders to return part of the embezzled pension funds as part of a plea deal. Not everything was recovered, too much had vanished into offshore accounts and fake shell companies, but it was enough. Retirees wouldn't lose their homes. Families would still see checks. The damage was brutal, but not fatal. Leonard had remained involved, though in a reduced capacity. At the company's request, he had designed a new internal auditing system, transparent, decentralized, tamper-proof. Every transaction over a certain threshold now triggered a 3-person review process, with automatic flagging to the oversight board. It wasn't perfect, but it was a far cry from the old days of unchecked executive privileges. Still, Leonard knew when it was time to step away. His final visit to Iron Legacy was brief. He'd walked the factory floor, exchanged a few hugs with old friends, and even shared a cup of coffee with Cheryl, who now served as the director of compliance. She looked different, less anxious, more sure of herself. "You're the reason we're still here," she said. "No," Leonard replied. "I'm the reason the truth came out. You're the reason this place still breathes." As he stepped outside for the last time, Mark, still the security guard, now proudly part of the co-op, saluted him with a small smile. Leonard returned the gesture, his visitor badge in hand. In the passenger seat of Olivia's car, Leonard exhaled long and slow. "How's it looking in there?" she asked, pulling away from the curb. "Better than I ever thought possible," he said. "They've got it under control now. No more shadows. No more secrets." She glanced over at him. "You're not going to miss it?" He paused. Then smiled. "Not the job. But the mission? Maybe a little." That evening, back in his modest home on the quiet street where the black SUV had once lurked, Leonard did something he hadn't done in over a year. He cleared out his office. Stacks of documents, labeled boxes full of financial records, statements, testimony, and internal emails, were packed away. Not to be destroyed, but to be archived. Preserved. Just in case history tried to repeat itself. At the bottom of the drawer was a leather-bound notebook, his wife Miriam's old journal. He hadn't opened it since her passing. He flipped it open. On the first page, in her handwriting. The truth is often inconvenient. But silence is more dangerous. Leonard sat still for a long time, letting the words settle. Then, he closed the drawer for good. The next morning, he began his new job. Not at a corporate firm, not in another corner office, and certainly not for a paycheck padded with bonuses and vague job titles. Leonard Mercer was now a part-time ethics consultant with the Midwest Association for Industrial Accountability, a nonprofit devoted to helping small and mid-sized manufacturers design transparent financial systems and ethical oversight frameworks. His role? Training auditors. Reviewing policies. Speaking at conferences filled with young professionals who'd never seen the inside of a whistleblower's world. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. At one such seminar, a junior compliance officer raised a hand during Leonard's session on detecting fraud in decentralized systems. "Mr. Mercer, did you ever think about walking away? Just keeping your head down and retiring quietly?" Leonard considered that. For a moment, the memories flooded back, Cara's veiled threats, Darren's trembling voice, the flashing lights outside the hotel conference room. "Yes," he said. "More than once. But silence would have made me complicit. And I'd promised someone, long ago, that I would never let lies replace the truth, not if I could help it." Another hand rose. "Would you do it all over again?" Leonard nodded. In a heartbeat. After the seminar, a small group stayed behind to speak with him. Among them was a young woman named Isla, freshly hired at a growing robotics manufacturer. "My company's expanding fast," she said nervously. "They've started skipping a few audit steps. Nothing illegal, I think. But it feels wrong." Leonard handed her a card. "Start documenting. Quietly. Track what's missing. And never underestimate how fast small issues can turn into headlines." She nodded, eyes wide. A spark of understanding passed between them, the torch being handed to a new generation. One evening, Leonard received a letter, an actual letter, not an email. It was from Darren Hayes. He was safe. Living under a new identity out of state, thanks to whistleblower protections. His family was fine. The federal government had officially cleared him of any wrongdoing and offered him a new role as a private safety inspector, anonymous, protected, and very much valued. The letter ended with a single line. "You didn't just save lives. You gave some of us a second chance to live ours." Leonard folded the paper slowly, letting that settle like a warm tide in his chest. Later, Olivia stopped by with takeout. They sat on the porch, watching the last of the sunset dissolve behind the trees. "You ever think about what life would have looked like if you hadn't done it?" she asked, sipping from a bottle of beer. "Yeah," he replied. "It would have looked normal. Quiet. But wrong. Like living with an infection you can't feel until it's too late." They sat in silence for a while. Then Olivia said softly, "You gave me a new definition of courage, Dad." He smiled. "It's not about being fearless. It's about doing the right thing even when you are." That night, Leonard placed the final Iron Veil file into a cabinet marked closed. Not erased. Not forgotten. Just finished. The story was no longer his to carry. It belonged to the records now, to the people who rebuilt, to the workers who stood tall even after everything collapsed. The man who once lived in spreadsheets and financial ledgers now lived in quiet purpose, mentoring those who'd one day face their own corporate crossroads. He went to bed with a clean conscience, and a heart that finally, after 19 long years, felt light. The numbers had spoken. And this time, the world had listened.